They say heartbreak is quiet. They lie. Mine wasn't quiet. It was a siren in my head, a crash I felt in my bones, a scream I couldn't let out because the world was watching. It happened in Lagos, where the nights are never truly dark and the air always tastes of something burning, something expensive, something alive. It happened under rooftop lights that dripped gold across the polished tiles, over laughter that rose like champagne bubbles, over the muffled thump of Afrobeats echoing between glass walls. The rooftop of the Eco Royale, a place where the skyline isn't just a view, it's a performance. Victoria Island below, glowing like someone scattered diamonds across black velvet. The lagoon in the distance, breathing under the moonlight. The Lekki Ikoyi Link Bridge blinking its lights like an unblinking eye, watching the whole city's secrets. And her, she was the only thing I could see, the only thing I would ever see. She wasn't with me. She was with him, a man whose watch alone could feed a family for a year, a man whose hand rested on her waist like it had been there forever. Her laugh, God, her laugh, rose above the music, above my pulse, and stabbed me where it hurt most. I didn't move at first. I just stood there, my feet rooted to the tiles, my chest tight. I could feel the wind tug at my shirt, the smell of her perfume, sweet, layered with something expensive, floating toward me even through the haze of cigars and night air. Her hands were on his chest, not accidentally, not politely, like she knew it, like she owned it. He whispered something in her ear. She tilted her head, lips brushing his jaw. And right then, something in me split, not like a crack in glass, not like wood snapping, like cloth, slow, tearing under invisible hands, each fiber holding on until it couldn't anymore. Lagos didn't stop for me. It never stops for anyone. The rooftop DJ spun the latest Burna Boy hit, and the beat crawled up my spine in mockery. Glasses clinked around the pool. Women in glittering gowns shifted like they were born to be adored. Men leaned in to speak over the music, their smiles sharp as knives. And me, standing in the middle of it all, realizing the woman I had built my life around had not just cheated. She had built her own city of men, and I was just one address on the map. 100. That's the number I would learn later. 100 men in the city. Some names I knew. Politicians who shook my hand at luncheons. CEOs I'd shared champagne with. Artists I'd taken selfies beside. Some I didn't know. Strangers whose lives I would never touch except through her. But all of them had been with her. The number wasn't gossip. It wasn't exaggeration. It was fact, written in photos, in messages, in whispers that found me long after I thought I'd heard it all. But that night, that rooftop, it was the first time the truth stood in front of me, wearing heels and a black silk dress, touching another man like I didn't exist. She saw me. I know she did. Her eyes flicked toward mine for a fraction of a second. Long enough to acknowledge me, short enough to erase me. No shock, no guilt, just dismissal, like I was a memory, like I was already gone. I turned away before my face could betray me. I didn't storm out. That would have given her too much. I walked, slowly, each step heavier than the last, each one pulling me away from the skyline, the laughter, the music, and from her. The hotel lobby smelled of lilies and money. Cold air-conditioned corridors leading to a revolving door that spat me into the heat of the Lagos night. Outside, life roared on. Okadas weaved through impatient SUVs. Street hawkers waved bottles of water and gala sausages at tinted car windows. The humid air stuck to my skin like something alive. I found my car in the valet bay, slid behind the wheel and started driving. No music, no calls. Just the hum of the engine and the sound of my own breathing, ragged, uneven, betraying the stillness I was trying to wear. Driving through Lagos at night is like watching the city breathe. Ikoyi's manicured streets gave way to the restless hum of Oberland. Bridges stretched over black water, lit like arteries pumping the city's lifeblood. Billboards glowed, advertising champagne, new estates, designer perfumes. And I drove through it all, feeling like an uninvited guest in the place I'd called home all my life. I kept replaying it in my mind. Her hands, his smile, the flicker of recognition in her eyes. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. A slow drowning in a pool of gold and perfume where everyone pretended not to notice you were sinking. I didn't cry. Not that night. I thought maybe I had forgotten how. Instead, my body carried the grief like heat, burning in my chest, pressing at my temples, making every breath feel like work. Lagos blurred outside the windshield. Traffic lights bleeding into headlights, pedestrians becoming shadows, the city moving faster than I could think. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex in Lekki Phase 1, the streets were thinning. Security guards nodded lazily at the gate. The night smelled of salt from the ocean and diesel from the generators. I parked, climbed the stairs, unlocked my door, and stepped into the silence. Silence in Lagos is rare. It's almost unnatural. But that night it felt heavy. It sat on my shoulders, crawled under my skin. I poured myself a drink, whiskey, neat, and sat on the balcony, watching the city lights blink. Somewhere far off, a party carried on. Somewhere closer, a generator coughed to life. And somewhere, maybe on that same rooftop, she was still laughing, still touching him, still erasing me without even knowing it. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just take someone from you. It takes the version of yourself you were when you still believed in them. It takes your softness, your trust, your unguarded edges, and leaves you with something harder, sharper. By morning, I knew this wasn't just the end of us. It was the beginning of something else, something I didn't yet understand. Because Lagos never takes without giving something back. Sometimes it gives you money. Sometimes it gives you scars. And sometimes, if you're unlucky enough, it gives you both. Love doesn't always walk into your life quietly. Sometimes it bursts through the crowd, dressed in red, and makes you think it was meant for you all along. I met her on a Thursday, not a special Thursday, just a Lagos Thursday, the kind where the air hangs heavy, the sun presses against your back, and the city hums like a restless engine that never switches off. I was in Balogun Market, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, the air thick with the smell of roasted plantain, sweat, leather, and diesel fumes. Vendors shouted prices over each other. Fabrics fluttered in the breeze like flags at war, and okadas honked at people who pretended not to hear them. And then I saw her. She was standing at a stall, one hand brushing over rolls of Ankara fabric. Her dress was red, not just red, but the kind of red that demands to be noticed. It caught the sunlight like fire and clung to her like it knew where it belonged. Her hair was pinned up, her neck bare except for a thin gold chain that glimmered when she moved. I don't know what it was that made me stop. Maybe it was her posture, relaxed but alert, like she was part of the chaos but untouched by it. Maybe it was her eyes, which met mine for the briefest second before sliding away, leaving me with a question I couldn't name. Lagos is full of beautiful women, but she wasn't just beautiful. She looked expensive, not in the way of a woman covered in designer labels, but in the way of someone who knows her worth and charges interest. I was there for business, contracts to deliver, people to meet. But suddenly, my schedule didn't matter. I found myself walking toward her, weaving between baskets of tomatoes and stacks of fabrics, the noise of the market melting into the background. She was speaking to the vendor, her voice calm, deliberate. When she reached for her purse, I saw the watch on her wrist. Slim, understated, but worth more than most people's rent for a year. I didn't know then that it was a gift from a man she'd already left behind. I didn't know that by the time I met her, she had already been loved and left, held and let go, by men who thought they could keep her. All I knew was that I wanted to know her. The market was a living thing that day. Pulsed, it shifted, it swallowed you if you didn't keep moving. She moved through it like she owned it. Not rushing, not hesitating, just flowing with the current and letting it part around her. When she walked away from the stall, I followed. Not close enough to be noticed, but close enough to keep her in sight. She stopped at a fruit stand, picked up a mango, and pressed it lightly to test its ripeness. The vendor smiled at her like he already knew she would take it. There was something magnetic about the way the world bent toward her, how people made space for her without thinking, how strangers leaned in just a little when she spoke. I didn't know it yet, but that was her gift. And her curse. The first time we spoke, her voice caught me off guard. It wasn't soft. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of voice that could cut through a crowd without raising its volume. A voice that knew where it was going and didn't waste time getting there. She asked me a question. Simple, almost casual, and I answered without thinking. And just like that, the market disappeared. Looking back now, I realize how quickly I fell into her orbit. It didn't feel like falling. It felt like being pulled by something inevitable. I told myself I was different. I told myself I wasn't like the other men whose shadows still clung to her. I didn't know I was already becoming one of them. Lagos has a way of speeding up love. The city moves fast, the nights are long, and the heat makes you believe in urgency. We went from strangers to something more in what felt like a single breath. We met for dinners in Ikoyi rooftop restaurants where the city lights stretched endlessly, the kind of places where you could almost believe the world was kind. We drove through Victoria Island at night, the streets empty except for security guards and the glow of 24-hour petrol stations. We sat on my balcony in Lekki, watching the rain fall like it was trying to wash the city clean. And through it all, I believed she was mine. I didn't see the other life, the life she lived when she wasn't with me. The men whose names I didn't know, the rooms I had never entered, the secrets that curled up in the corners of her smile. She was careful, too careful, and I mistook that for loyalty. Now, when I think about those early days, I see the signs I ignored. The sudden phone calls she wouldn't take in front of me. The way she would disappear for hours and come back smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. The nights she would stare at the city from my balcony with a look I couldn't read. Part longing, part something else. But back then, I didn't question it. Because love, especially in Lagos, is built on the lies we choose to believe. When I brought her into my world, I thought I was giving her something new. I took her to business events in Banana Island, introduced her to people who could change her life. She fit in too easily, too perfectly. The truth is, she had been here before, just with other men. She knew the way the game was played, and I was playing it without even knowing the rules. By the time I realized I wasn't the only man in her life, it was too late. I was already in love. And in Lagos, love is a currency. Once you've spent it, there's no getting it back. I should have known the city had its hands on her long before I did. Lagos shapes people in its image. Beautiful, dangerous, full of promise, and built on secrets. I thought I was saving her. I didn't know I was stepping into her story at the exact chapter where men like me always lose. Betrayal never comes all at once. It arrives in fragments, small enough to swallow, sharp enough to bleed you from the inside. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. That the phone calls she took on the balcony were business. That the perfume I didn't recognize on her clothes was just a trick of the air in Lagos taxis. That the nights she didn't pick up my calls were because of bad network. But the city knew. Lagos has a way of whispering truths you don't want to hear. A friend will mention seeing someone you know, somewhere they shouldn't have been. A stranger's story will echo too close to your own. And sometimes, the truth shows up without warning. Like a crack in the pavement you trip over even though you thought you were walking straight. The first crack came at a dinner in Ikoyi. A man I barely knew, wealthy, well-connected, leaned across the table and asked me if I was still seeing her. The way he said it made my skin crawl. He didn't look at me. He looked at his wine glass. And then he changed the subject. After that, I started noticing things. At events in Victoria Island, men I'd never met would glance at her a little too long, like they were remembering something. Sometimes she'd smile back. Other times, she'd pretend not to notice, but I could see the flicker of recognition in her eyes. When we were out together, she moved like she owned every room. When we were apart, she disappeared into the city like smoke. Impossible to follow, impossible to hold. One night, after she left my apartment in Lekki, I stood on the balcony and watched her get into an Uber. The car turned toward Admiralty Way, swallowed by traffic. I told myself she was going home. 2 hours later, a friend called me from a club in 6. "She's here," he said. I didn't ask with who. I didn't want to know. The city felt different after that. It wasn't just home. It was a map of all the places she might be when she wasn't with me. Hotel rooftops in Victoria Island, private parties in Ikoyi mansions, smoky lounges where the air is thick with secrets. Every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if it was her or about her. The truth came to me in pieces. A photo here, a name there, stories I overheard but pretended I didn't. One night, in a dim restaurant on Awolowo Road, a man slid an envelope across the table. Inside were photographs, grainy but clear enough. Her, with different men, different nights, different places. The dates stretched back months, some even before we met, some while we were together. And the number, it wasn't 1, it wasn't 5, it was dozens. By the time I pieced it together, the whispers had given me a number. 100. First, I didn't believe it. Then I told myself it didn't matter, that love could survive anything. But love doesn't survive truth like that. It rots under it. The more I learned, the more the city felt like it was closing in on me. Driving past hotels, I'd wonder if she had been inside. Passing men in expensive cars, I'd wonder if they knew her better than I did. Every glass of champagne, every rooftop view, every soft laugh in the night felt tainted, like the city was reminding me she was never mine. But I stayed, because leaving meant admitting I had been wrong about her. And pride is a heavy chain. I told myself I was giving her a chance to choose me. But deep down, I knew I was waiting for proof that she never would. That proof came on a night I'll never forget. A party in a high-rise overlooking the lagoon. Music low, lights dim. The air heavy with perfume and the quiet hum of power. She was across the room, talking to a man I recognized from the business pages. A man known for two things: money and women. She didn't see me at first. When she did, her smile didn't falter. But her eyes told me everything. They didn't widen in surprise. They didn't soften in guilt. They just acknowledged me, like I was part of the furniture. That night, I left before she could come over. I drove the long way home, through streets that felt like they were watching me. Billboards glowed above me, selling things I no longer wanted. The lagoon lay black and still, holding the city's reflections like secrets it would never give up. By the time I got home, I knew what was coming. I knew the rooftop night was inevitable. And yet, when it came, it still broke me. The night on the rooftop didn't end when I walked away. It followed me home. It followed me into the silence of my apartment, into the cold glass of whiskey in my hand, into the hum of the generator outside my window. It followed me into my dreams. I thought the worst part of betrayal was the moment you saw it. It's not. The worst part comes after, in the days when the city still moves like nothing happened, but you can't take a single step without feeling it in your bones. Lagos didn't pause for me. The traffic still clogged Ozumbambadu in the mornings. Hawkers still weaved between cars, selling bottled water, plantain chips, newspapers. Rooftop parties still pulsed in Victoria Island on Friday nights. I would sit on my balcony and watch the city live without me. The streetlights blinking, the occasional siren cutting through the air, the low murmur of life spilling in from the road. And I'd wonder how many nights she had been out there, moving through the same city, while I thought she was mine. The first week after the rooftop, I didn't call her. She didn't call me either. There were no apologies, no explanations. We were silent, but it wasn't peace. It was a war neither of us wanted to start, because starting it meant ending everything. I told myself I didn't need closure. But at night, when the city was quieter, I'd catch myself replaying every moment we'd shared. The dinners in Ikoyi, the slow drives through Lekki after rain, the way she used to lean on the balcony rail like she owned the skyline. And then, like a cruel twist of the knife, I'd remember the number. 100. It's strange, the way numbers can haunt you. They don't fade. They don't get softer. They just sit there, sharp and cold, waiting for you to think you've forgotten them. Sometimes I'd wonder if it was true, if maybe it was exaggerated. But then I'd remember the photographs, the whispers, the way her eyes didn't flinch on that rooftop. The truth didn't need defending. It had already done its work. 2 weeks passed before I saw her again. Not in person on a billboard. An ad for a fashion brand. She was smiling, wearing a silk dress, the city's skyline behind her. For a moment, I felt that old pull, the same one I'd felt the first time I saw her in Balagan Market. Then I remembered the rooftop, and the pull turned into something else. Not hate, not even anger, just release. Letting go in Lagos is different. The city doesn't let you retreat quietly. You'll see the person again, at parties, in headlines, in passing cars with tinted windows. You'll hear their name in conversations you're not part of. And you'll learn to pretend you're unaffected, even when your chest tightens. I learned fast. I stopped going to the places we used to go. I turned down invitations I knew she might accept. I built my days around work, my nights around silence. And slowly, the city stopped offering her to me. One night, I drove alone to the shore. The air smelled of salt and wet sand. The waves broke quietly against the rocks, the sound almost lost under the hum of the city behind me. I stood there for hours, thinking about how much of myself I had given to her. Not just love, but time, energy, pieces of my life I could never get back. And then I thought about how little of herself she had really given to me. That was when it hit me. The betrayal wasn't just in her sleeping with other men. It was in her letting me believe I was the only one, when I was just one of many. The city had taught her that love was a transaction. It had taught her to collect hearts the way others collect business cards. Not for keeps, but for leverage. And I had been just another card in her deck. But the city had taught me something too. It had taught me that value isn't in the glittering places where everyone looks for it. It's in the things the city ignores, in loyalty, in quiet, in people who don't need the world to see them shine to know they are worth something. Months later, I would meet someone else. Not in a rooftop lounge, not in a designer store, not in a place that smelled of money. I met her at a roadside cafe in Yaba, a place where the fans rattled, the chairs wobbled, and the tea was served in chipped cups. She didn't move like the city owed her anything. She didn't speak like her words needed to impress. She just was. And for the first time since the rooftop, I felt the weight in my chest lift. Looking back now, I don't hate the woman who betrayed me. She was a part of my story, just not the ending. The city made her, and the city unmade me, and maybe that's how it had to be. Because Lagos is not kind. It will take what you love, strip it to its bones, and hand it back to you so you can see what it really was. And if you're lucky, it will leave you with the lesson. Mine was simple. Humility matters more than beauty. Loyalty outlasts lust. And the richest things in life are often hidden far from the lights.